I was sat at that restaurant table for 47 minutes. I know, because I counted. The candle in front of me had burned down almost an inch. The waiter had refilled my water glass 3 times without me asking. That particular kind of quiet pity that makes everything worse. My blind date hadn't shown up. No call, no message. Just silence on the other end of a phone screen. I kept checking like it owed me something. I was reaching for my jacket, rehearsing the exact story I would never tell anyone, when the chair across from me moved. I looked up, and my heart did something I still don't have a word for. It was her, Elena Choi, CEO of the company where I'd worked for 3 years. The woman whose name alone straightened every spine in every hallway. She wasn't in her boardroom armor tonight, no sharp blazer, no controlled expression. She was wearing something simple, and she looked uncertain, almost fragile. She sat down slowly, folded her hands on the table, and looked at me the way someone looks when they've rehearsed something 100 times and forgotten every word. Then she said, "Can I tell you something?" I didn't move. I'm not sure I even breathed. Because in 3 years of working at Meridian Group, I had never once been this close to Elena Choi outside of a company-wide meeting. And even then, she was always at the front of the room, composed, precise, untouchable. The kind of woman who made you sit up straighter just by walking hand past. But here she was. Sitting across from me at a restaurant table meant for someone else. Her hands were folded a little too tightly. Her eyes, dark, careful, intelligent, were watching me with something I couldn't name yet. I finally found my voice. "Ms. Choi," I said, because 3 years of professional conditioning don't dissolve in 30 seconds. Something flickered across her face. Almost amusement. Almost. "You can call me Elena tonight," she said quietly. "I think the situation warrants it." I looked around the restaurant, at the other couples, at the soft lighting, at the half-melted candle between us, then back at her. "What situation is that exactly?" She exhaled. It was a small sound, barely audible, but it carried weight, like she'd been holding it in for longer than just tonight. "The blind date," she said. "I arranged it." I stared at her. "You arranged it," I repeated. "Yes, you arranged a blind date." I paused. "With yourself." She held my gaze steadily, but there was the faintest color rising in her cheeks. I was going to walk in. I had every intention of walking in. I stood outside that door for 11 minutes, and then she stopped, looked down at the table. I lost my nerve. I sat back in my chair slowly, in all the scenarios I had imagined for this evening, being stood up, going home early, ordering dessert out of spite. Not one of them had included this. Not one of them had included her. "Why?" I asked. It was the only word I had. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that has texture to it. "Because I need your help," she finally said. And I didn't know how to ask you any other way. She reached into the small bag beside her and placed a cream-colored envelope on the table between us. I looked at it without touching it. "My father is hosting his annual family gala next Saturday," she said, her voice returning to something more composed, more like the Elena Choi I recognized. "He has spent the better part of this year arranging introductions. Potential partners, in his words. Men he has vetted and approved and decided are suitable for me." A pause. "I have no interest in any of them. And you need someone to play the role," I said slowly. "I need someone believable," she said. "Someone who knows how to carry a conversation. Someone who won't be intimidated by the environment." Her eyes met mine directly. "I've watched you work, James. You're calm under pressure. You're genuine. People trust you instinctively." I didn't know whether to feel flattered or completely blindsided. I settled on both. "Mrs. Choi, Elena. The name felt strange in my mouth, like wearing something that didn't belong to me yet. You understand how this sounds." "I do," she said simply, "and I wouldn't ask if I had another option." There was something in that last sentence that landed differently than she probably intended. A quiet honesty beneath the practicality of it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't expected to find. She was nervous. Not the manufactured calm of a CEO managing a difficult conversation. Genuinely, quietly nervous. I pulled the envelope toward me and opened it. Inside was a single card. The Gala Cubley details. Elegant print. Next Saturday evening. And below the address, written in her own handwriting, small, careful letters, were 3 words. Please say yes. I looked up at her. She was watching me with those careful eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, Elena Choi looked like someone who was waiting, truly waiting, on someone else's answer. I set the card down on the table. Tell me the terms, I said. And for the first time that evening, she smiled. We met 3 times that week. She called them preparation sessions. I called them the strangest, most disorienting hours of my adult life. But I showed up to every single one, because something about that handwritten note, please say yes, had rearranged something quiet inside me that I hadn't noticed until it moved. The first session was at her office. After hours. The building was mostly empty, which somehow made it more uncomfortable. She had prepared an actual document, bullet points, talking points, a brief biography of her father's key associates and their respective sensitivities. I looked at the document, then looked at her. You made a study guide, I said. I made a reference sheet, she corrected, without looking up. For a fake date. She looked up then. For a high-stakes social event requiring contextual preparation. I pressed my lips together to keep from smiling. Right, of course. She held my gaze for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, then looked back down at the document. That was the first crack. The second session was different. She had suggested we practice conversation. Natural conversation, she said. The kind that would convince her father's circle that we had a genuine history. We sat in a small cafe 2 blocks from the office, and she was trying very hard to be casual about it, which made her the least casual person in the room. Tell me something about yourself, she said with the energy of someone conducting an interview. Something you don't already know? I asked. Or should I just forward you my HR file? She gave me a look. I've read your HR file. I paused. That's either very professional or mildly alarming. It was research. For the fake date study guide. Reference sheet. And then, I don't know which one of us broke first, but we were both laughing. Real laughter. The kind that catches you off guard and leaves you slightly breathless. She covered her mouth with her hand like she was trying to contain it, and I thought, in that unguarded moment, that she was the most unexpectedly human person I had ever seen. The laughter faded slowly. She looked out the cafe window. A small smile remained. Street food, she said quietly. Sorry, you asked me something real about yourself. She turned back to me. I love street food, embarrassingly so. My father would be horrified. Last Tuesday, I ate a corn dog outside a convenience store at 11 o'clock at night, and it was genuinely one of the better moments of my week. I stared at her. The CEO of Meridian Group, I said slowly, eating a convenience store corn dog, alone, at 11 p.m. Don't make it strange. It's a little strange. It was a very good corn dog. I laughed again, and this time, so did she, without covering her mouth. The third session was at my apartment. She had insisted we practice the small things. How we entered a room together. How I'd place my hand at the small of her back. How she'd lean slightly into me when she laughed. Details, she said. Believability lives in the details. What she hadn't prepared for, what neither of us had prepared for, was how naturally it came. I adjusted my jacket collar, and she stepped forward to fix my tie without thinking, her fingers working the knot with quiet focus. She was close enough that I could see the slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated. You always do this, she murmured. Do what? Wear it slightly crooked. She smoothed the tie flat against my chest. Her hand rested there for just a moment longer than the task required. Then she seemed to realize. She stepped back. Better, she said, her voice perfectly even. But she didn't quite meet my eyes, and I stood there, with the ghost of her hand still warm against my chest, thinking that I was in serious trouble. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever felt something real in a situation that was never supposed to be? And if you want to know what happened at that gala, make sure you're subscribed. Because what happened next changed everything. The night of the gala arrived the way significant things always do, quietly and all at once. I stood outside the venue in my rented suit, watching black cars pull up one after another, watching people who wore wealth like a second skin step effortlessly into the light. I had been to important events before, but this was different. This was her world. And for the first time I felt the full distance between where she lived and where I did. My phone buzzed. I'm 2 minutes away. Are you ready? I typed back. Define ready. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. James, I'm ready, I sent back. Another pause. Then, you fixed your tie? I looked down at my tie, perfectly straight. I had checked it 4 times. Perfectly crooked, I replied. This time the response was immediate. Don't make me laugh before I get out of the car. And just like that, the distance I'd been feeling closed by half. When she stepped out of the car, I forgot, briefly, how to construct a sentence. She was wearing deep navy, something simple and devastating at the same time. Her hair was down, which I had never seen before. She walked toward me with that familiar composure, but her eyes went straight to my tie the moment she reached me. She reached up and adjusted it, just slightly, the same way she had in my apartment. You did that on purpose, she said. I have no idea what you're talking about. She looked up at me, and there it was, that smile she tried to contain and never quite could. Shall we? She said, offering her arm. After you, Miss Choi, Elena. Alina, I said. And we walked in together. Her father was exactly what I had prepared for, and nothing like what I had imagined. Victor Choi was a large, warm, thunderously present man who shook my hand for slightly too long, and looked at me with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He approved of my handshake, apparently, because he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good, a man who looks you in the eye." Alina beside me was perfectly composed, but her hand, tucked inside my arm, pressed just slightly tighter. I covered her hand with mine without thinking. She didn't pull away. The evening moved the way galas do, in waves of conversation and champagne and careful laughter. We navigated it together, falling into a rhythm that felt less like performance and more like something we had simply always known. I made her father laugh twice. She rescued me gracefully from a 40-minute conversation about international shipping regulations. "You owe me," she murmured as we stepped away. "I thought I was the one doing you a favor tonight. The shipping conversation cancels the debt. We're even. I don't think that's how debt works. I'm the CEO. I decide how debt works." I leaned slightly closer, only at the office. She glanced up at me, and for a half-second, something moved behind her eyes, quick and warm and unguarded. Then the orchestra began. She danced the way she did everything, precisely, gracefully, with complete control. But somewhere in the middle of the second song, the control loosened, just slightly. She was close, her hand in mine, and the music was slow, and the light was the color of warm amber, and she said, very quietly, "I'm always alone in rooms full of people." I looked down at her every event, every dinner, every meeting. Her voice was low, almost private. I smile and I speak, and I perform every version of myself that's required. And then I go home and the quiet is. She stopped. "Loud," I said softly. She looked up at me. "Yes," she whispered, "exactly that." We kept moving with the music. I was aware of her breath, her hand, the small space between us that felt significant. "You don't have to perform tonight," I said. "Not with me." She was quiet for a long moment. The song swelled around us. Then she rested her head, just slightly, just barely, against my shoulder, and I knew with complete and terrifying clarity that the deal we had made at that restaurant table had nothing to do with what was happening now. Nothing at all. It happened the way most painful things happen. Not dramatically. Not with warning. Just a wrong turn down a quiet corridor, and a conversation I was never meant to hear. I had slipped away from the main hall to find the restroom. The corridor outside was lined with tall windows and low lighting, and two voices carried clearly through a half-open door to my left. I recognized the first voice immediately. Victor Choi, warm and thunderous, the way he'd been all evening. The second voice belonged to a man he'd introduced earlier as Chairman Park. A business associate. Old family friend. I wasn't paying attention at first. I was checking my phone, half smiling at a photo someone had taken of Elena and me near the entrance. The way she was looking slightly up at me. The way I was already looking at her, then I heard my name. The young man she brought. James, was it? Yes, Victor said, and I could hear the satisfaction in it. Smart choice on her part, very smart. A calculated move, Chairman Park said approvingly, bringing someone presentable enough to satisfy the room. It helped her case considerably tonight. A pause. Then Victor, lower now, almost conspiratorial. Between us, it secured the board's confidence. They've been questioning whether she has the personal stability for the expanded role. Showing up tonight with someone credible, someone genuine. A short laugh. She knows exactly how to play the long game, always has. I'm proud of her. So the young man, Chairman Park said. He knows his role. He played it perfectly, Victor said. Exactly what she needed. A convincing performance. The door was still half open. The light from inside fell in a pale rectangle across the corridor floor. I stood completely still. A convincing performance. Exactly what she needed. She knows how to play the long game. I looked back down at the photo on my phone. At the way she was looking at me in it, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Something that told me, with quiet devastation, exactly how far I had already fallen without realizing it. Because it shouldn't have hurt this much. If this were truly just an arrangement, a deal with terms and boundaries, and a clear expiration, it shouldn't have landed in my chest the way it did. Heavy and sharp and intimate. But it did. I put my phone in my pocket. I went back to the main hall. Elena was across the room, speaking with two women I didn't recognize, and she saw me the moment I walked in. She said something brief to the women and began to move toward me, and her expression was open and warm, in a way I had never seen on her face in 3 years of working at the same company. It made it worse. "There you are," she said when she reached me. "I was going to send a search party. I'm here," I said. She studied my face for a moment. Something flickered in her eyes, quick, perceptive. She had always been perceptive. "Are you all right?" "Fine," I said. The word came out evenly, professionally, like a door closing. She was quiet for a moment. I watched her read the shift in me, watched her try to understand it, watched something uncertain move across her expression. "James, I think we've done what we came to do," I said quietly. "Your father is happy. The room is convinced. You've secured whatever you needed to secure tonight." The words were calm, measured, but I watched them land. Her expression didn't collapse. It did something quieter and more painful than that. It stilled. The warmth I'd seen there a moment ago receded slowly, like something retreating to safety. "I see," she said. 2 words, perfectly composed, but her hands at her sides were no longer still. I picked up my jacket from the back of a nearby chair. "Congratulations on the expanded role," I said, and I walked toward the door. The night air hit me the moment I stepped outside. Cold and sharp and immediate. The kind that fills your lungs too fast and makes everything feel slightly more real than you're ready for. The parking lot was quiet out here, distant from the warm light, and the orchestra still playing faintly inside. I stood on the steps and exhaled slowly, watching my breath disappear into the dark. I told myself I was fine. I told myself this was the logical conclusion to a logical arrangement. Terms had been met. The evening was complete. I was a professional who had done a professional favor, and the emotion sitting heavily in my chest was simply the result of an unusual situation. I almost believed it. I was halfway across the parking lot when I heard the doors open behind me. James, her voice, slightly breathless, like she had moved quickly. I stopped walking, but I didn't turn around immediately. I needed one more second, just one. James, please. I turned. She was standing at the top of the steps, and she hadn't stopped to collect her wrap or her bag. She was exactly as she'd been inside. Navy dress, hair down. The gala still audible behind her. And it had started to rain. Softly at first. The kind of rain that arrives without announcement, and she didn't move back toward the door. She walked down the steps toward me. "Whatever you heard," she said. "Let me explain." "You don't have to explain anything," I said. "We had an arrangement. It worked. That's a good outcome. Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Being professional." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Stop being professional with me right now." The rain was falling steadily now. Her hair was getting wet. Mine too. Neither of us moved. "What would you like me to be?" I asked, and I heard it in my own voice. The thing I'd been keeping measured and contained since that corridor. The rawness beneath it. "Honest," she said. "Just honest." I looked at her standing in the rain, and something in me gave way. "All right," I said quietly. "Honestly, I felt like a prop tonight. I felt like something you place strategically in a room to serve a purpose. And the worst part," I stopped, breathed. "The worst part is that somewhere between a study guide and a corn dog, and you fixing my tie in my apartment, I forgot that that's what I was." The rain fell between us. She was looking at me with an expression I had no category for, not in 3 years, not in any version of Elena Choi I had ever encountered. "You were never a prop," she said. Her voice was low and unsteady in a way that the Elena Choi of boardrooms and bullet points simply did not sound. "What my father said, what you heard. James, he doesn't know. He saw what he wanted to see because that's what he does. But I..." She stopped. Her jaw tightened slightly. She was fighting something. I could see it. "You what?" I asked. "I was terrified," she said finally. I stood outside that restaurant for 11 minutes because I was terrified. Not of my father's gala. Not of the board's opinion. She looked at me directly, rain on her face, composure completely and utterly gone. "Of you. Of what you might say if I just walked in and sat down and told you the truth without the arrangement and the terms and the safety of a plan." My chest was very tight. "Elena, I have spent a long time being capable," she said, and her voice broke on the word in a way that reached somewhere deep and quiet inside me. "I have spent a long time being in control of every room I walk into. And then you." She let out a shaking breath. "You laughed with me. You looked at me like I was a person and not a position, and I didn't know what to do with that." The rain was steady and soft around us. I looked at her, really looked at her, standing there without her armor, without her composure, without any of the careful layers she wore every single day, and I took one step toward her. "Tell me the truth then," I said quietly. "Right now, no arrangement, no terms." She looked up at me, her eyes were bright. From the rain maybe, or maybe not, and she opened her mouth to speak. I need to pause right here, because what she said next is the thing that broke me completely. If you've ever loved someone from a distance, afraid they'd never see you the same way, this next part is for you. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been too afraid to say the thing you most needed to say? Because Elena was. And what happened in that rain changed everything. She said, "I think I have loved you for a long time." Just like that, no qualification. No strategic phrasing. No carefully constructed sentence designed to maintain plausible deniability. Just 7 words, standing in the rain, looking at me like the saying of them had cost her everything and freed her at the same time. I didn't speak for a moment, not because I didn't have words, but because some moments deserve a breath of silence before you step into them. Because some things, once responded to, change the entire architecture of your life and I wanted, just for 1 second, to be fully present at the threshold of it. "How long?" I asked quietly. She laughed softly, a small, helpless sound. "Long enough that I memorized which coffee you order on Monday mornings. Long enough that I rerouted my walk to my office so it passed your department." She shook her head slightly. "Long enough that when the matchmaker my father hired sent me a profile, and I looked at the suggested candidate and thought, no, that's not right. None of them are right. I realized it was because I was already." She stopped. "Because there was already someone." The rain fell quietly around us. "Me," I said. "You," she said. "I want to tell you I said something eloquent. I want to tell you I produced exactly the right words in exactly the right order. But the truth is, I stepped forward, and I took her face gently in my hands. And I looked at her. This woman who had memorized my coffee order and rerouted her mornings and stood outside a restaurant door for 11 minutes out of pure, terrifying love. And I said, "You could have just told me." She laughed again, and this time it was full and real and slightly undone. "I'm a CEO, we don't just tell people things. You told me tonight. You were leaving," she said, softer now. "I wasn't going to let you leave." The rain was gentle on my shoulders. "I'm not leaving," I said. And I meant it in every way it could possibly be meant. But I have to tell you about 4 days later, because the rain and the parking lot and the confession, as significant as they were not the moment that undid me completely. That happened in her office. On a Tuesday morning, ordinary light, ordinary sounds of the building around us. I had come to discuss a project handover with her assistant, and her assistant had stepped away, and suddenly it was just us in her doorway, the first time we had been alone since the gala. She was holding a coffee cup. She held it out toward me. I looked down at it, then up at her. "Monday's order," she said quietly. "I know it's Tuesday. I wasn't sure you'd come by Monday, so I waited. A coffee cup, held out in a doorway, by a woman who ran a company and had stood in the rain and said 7 words that rearranged my entire life. I took the cup. "Elena," I said. "James," she said. "Have dinner with me tonight." Not as an arrangement. Not with terms or reference sheets or bullet points. No study guide. No gala. No performance required from either of us. Just dinner. Just us. She looked at me for a long moment, those careful, intelligent eyes, and I watched every layer of the CEO, every practiced composure, every carefully maintained distance, dissolve into something simple and warm and entirely real. "I know a place," she said. "They have excellent street food." I smiled. She smiled. And for the first time in what felt like a very long time, neither of us was pretending to be anything other than exactly what we were, 2 people, standing in an ordinary doorway, completely certain, and that was how it began. Not with a grand plan or a perfect moment, but with a coffee cup held out on a Tuesday morning and the quiet, extraordinary courage it takes to finally say the true thing. She had loved me from a distance for a long time. And I, standing there with that warm cup in my hands and that smile on her face, I understood that some of the best things in life are not found. They are simply finally seen. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love is not always loud, that sometimes it lives quietly in rerouted hallways and memorized coffee orders, and 11 minutes of courage outside a door, please share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video. Subscribe for more stories that reach into the real and human parts of us. And leave me a comment, just 1 word. The word you felt most while listening. I'll read every single one.